A panel discussion on the interoperability for cross-border payments. The moderator for this panel will be Mr. Pat Patel, Executive Director, Elevandi. May I request Pat to please take the stage? Thank you. Pat will be joined by Mr. Naushad, Contractor, the Chief Executive Officer, Fable Fintech. Naushad, please. May I also welcome Richard Anderson, Senior Vice President, JCB Card International South Asia, and Stefan Merz, Managing Director at Chief Strategy at Growth Officer, PPRO, who will be joined with by Subhrajit Basu, the Regional SVP APAC Markets, Wallets and Fintech at Discovery Financial Services, and also welcome Donn Kwong, Head of Partnerships at Pomelo Pay. Thank you so much, gentlemen. May I ask Pat to take it from here, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's a great pleasure to be here. So just a little intro on me. My name is Pat Patel. I am the Executive Director for a company called Elevandi, which was set up by the Monetary Authority of Singapore, in clearly Singapore. And we set this up ultimately to build bridges between the public and private sector around the world. And so the purpose of this conversation today, as you can see, is around interoperability for cross-border payments. But the bit around this, ultimately, is nobody wakes up in the morning thinking, I'm going to make a payment today. I'm going to have a great time at making that payment. And so that begs the question, why are we all here? And the simple answer to this is, payments are complex. Payments can be inconvenient and can be very costly. And so that is the reason and the purpose of this panel. And it's also one of the key facts about payments is that it is probably one of the most lucrative verticals within fintech. If you look at some of the investments that have been made over the years, it's absolutely insane. We're talking about billions has been poured in from investors around the world into payments. So whether it's companies like Stripe, whether it's Klarna, whether it's Wise, they've all been really well funded. And it's a spotlight because while payments can be quite mundane, it's absolutely crucial to the functioning of an economy. And so if we look at, say, India, and there were some great presentations yesterday by the legend that is Nandan Nilekani, about 87 billion USD in remittances occur in India, whether that's receiving, ingoing or outgoing. And it's probably more if you include the black market, and it's an unknown number there. So it's way above the 87 billion that's currently quoted, which equates to 3.2% of GDP. So today we have an esteemed panel from all walks of life, and I think I want to ask each one of the panelists to give maybe a one or two liner on who you are and a little bit about your organization. But if we can try and keep it to 1 minute, that would be fantastic. So your time starts now.
Hi everyone, my name is Naushad. I run a company called Fable Fintech. It's a cross-border transaction technology platform company. Anybody who wants to think of making a cross-border transaction of any kind, person-to-person, business, whatever, legal, illegal, etc., you should think of us because we'll ensure it's legal, but you should anyway think of us. I'm just taking a cue from the 50% extra that Pat just alluded to. Very nice to be here. Thank you for your time.
Hi. I am Richard Anderson. I look after JCB's business in India. JCB is the only brand, international brand from Japan. We work with a partnership with NPCI. I look after India business.
Yeah. Hello? Hello? Oh, okay. So my name is Merz. I'm with PPRO, right? And we are helping payment service providers, banks, fintechs to solve the complexity of cross-border business. We're operating an infrastructure layer where we're connected, where we have 150 local payment methods connected to, and we are really an infrastructure layer and the whales, right, for what Pat described, payments, and we're not waking up in the morning and thinking about we're doing a payment today, right?
I don't know. Maybe there's some people in the room that do that. We'll find out.
Hi everyone. My name is Subhrajit. I work for Discover Financial Services. If that name doesn't ring a bell, then Diners Club. And I'm responsible managing commercial payments for APAC and geographic GM for this part of the region.
Hello, everyone. My name is Donn. I'm from Pomelo Pay. So it's a UK-based fintech with eyes in the emerging Asia market itself. Our customer is the banks itself. So I take care of the global partnerships, and basically I'm building a partner ecosystems for our customers to make more money.
Thank you. So it's great to have a diversity of voices, but also a diversity of companies on a panel. And that's why this session is going to be really compelling. We're going to start off with a small game here. And some of the panelists know about this game, but not all of the panelists. And it's a game called Underrated, Overrated. So what I'll be doing is either throwing in a phrase, something maybe a little bit controversial, or a type of payment method. And the panel have to simply say whether this fact or this phrase is underrated or overrated. And so the first thing I'm going to start off with is cryptocurrency is the best form for cross-border payments. Underrated or overrated?
Overrated.
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 Agree with the crowd, overrated.
I want to agree, but maybe to make it interesting, I would say underrated.
Wow.
Let's have
Wow.
a discussion.
Does anyone in the room think it's underrated, cryptocurrency, as the form for cross-border transactions? There's nobody in the room. So I think if you went to a blockchain event, you went to Consensus, it would be the other way round. So okay, give us a reason why. Why is it absolutely overrated?
In most parts of the world, cryptocurrency is not a need. So as a form of, trading in them, it's a very different thing versus using them as a payment method. For trading in them, a lot of people must have made a lot of money, and that's why it's great for them. But as a payment method, do you really need it? The answer is definitely no. And that's why it's underrated as per me.
But if you take away the trading, the casino style of cryptocurrency, let's park that, and you look at the utility, the value of the actual technology, surely it can get from point A to point B much quicker without intermediaries.
No, I agree with that statement. The only point is any payment needs to have inbuilt trust. Does at this point in time crypto inspires that kind of trust? That's a question mark. The day the technology and the payment form inspires trust, I think the answer would be different. But as of now, no.
I see it fairly similar, right? And as PPRO, I think one of our shareholders is PayPal. And I once talked to the PayPal chief strategy officer, and he told me PayPal is actually a security company that happens to be in payments, right? And it was very eye-opening for me because it's about trust, right? And the reason why people using different payment methods is because there's trust in a certain payment method, right? And that's exactly, I think, the answer. I think to make money, probably Bitcoin is the right thing, but is there trust? I don't know, I have question marks.
So does it change if it's digital currencies and we're talking about CBDCs? Does that change?
If it's a sovereign back, yes.
Okay, stablecoins?
I mean, personally, I don't really believe in cryptocurrency because there's no underlying fundamental values to that. But the underlying technology, like the blockchain, I think is undeniable. It will be here, and it is really making things very differently. So if you talk about CDBC and stable coins, I will personally vouch for that. That should help really, especially all the smart contract stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer that blockchain and the technology is going to actually take this thing forward. But in the current form, like the panelists have mentioned, with the security issues, with trust issues that they have, and also the acceptability issues that a lot of countries will have on crypto right now, it's not a viable form for people to look at, for transferring money from A to B. So at this point, the technology is great, the idea is great, but implementation is going to require building that trust and security in the system.
Okay.
It's very much like NFC was, say, 10 years ago.
Okay.
Exciting, but not useful.
There's another meaning of that, no effing chance. So we're going to move on to card transactions. So card transactions are the best form for cross-border transactions for commerce.
Any kind of transaction is always got its own requirements, and for certain use cases, I'm sure cards are one up on the others, and for other use cases, probably they are not. So it's not. It would be incorrect to make a blanket statement that any form of payment is God's gift to this ecosystem in general. So there could be certain transactions where cards are great, but certain transactions where cards don't play any role because of multiple reasons. It could be cost, form factor, unavailability, requirement of infrastructure, so on and so forth.
So we're going to go back to the game. So it's underrated, overrated.
Sorry, didn't say that.
It's two simple words. And I'm going to flip this. Cards will die in 5 to 10 years' time.
That statement is underrated. They won't.
Okay?
They won't.
They won't.
Very underrated, they won't.
This one I can't say they will. Yeah, because I think they will still need some kind of form factor. Yeah, you need to feel it somehow.
Next time you have to ask him first.
I was going to ask you first.
Yeah.
It just goes onto your mobile. You just don't need that plastic. Okay, so embedded finance, embedded payments. So underrated, overrated.
This one I would say underrated. Yeah.
Okay.
They are critical. Yeah.
Purely from a financial inclusion lens and the way you spread the finance, underrated.
Yeah, I would say it's also underrated, and I believe it's a growth opportunity.
Yeah, underrated.
I would say it's underrated in the short term and overrated in the long term.
Okay, because explain a little bit further.
The incumbents will catch up, and then this embedded finance thing might not become relevant. That's my view.
It's a buzzword at the moment around the world. Everyone's saying embedded finance is the way forward, but ultimately that means the money leaves your account much quicker.
That's fine, as long as the place where the money is finally actually placed in embedded finance, when those guys take over the rails, the guys creating this embeddedness will kind of become irrelevant.
Okay. Anyone want to add to that, or should we? It sounds like everyone's unanimous. Okay, we're going to move on. So banks will continue to be spectators in the cross-border payments race.
Definitely underrated. Yeah.
See, you asked him first, he's got a different answer.
Let's go do it. Yeah. Okay, explain.
I mean, they definitely have to be an active participant. No way they can, be a spectator for now. If I look at our friend PPRO here, there are major banks invested into the company. Yeah, right. So
Okay.
they are definitely doing something on that. Yeah.
Let's move on.
Definitely underrated because no government will lose control of the ability to own the monetary system. And banks are the instrument to own the monetary system, right? So
Even for cross-border?
even for cross-border, because it again still between one monetary system or one monetary authority to another monetary authority, right? So as long as that dramatically doesn't change, banks will be fulcrum to money movement irrespective.
But what if you use TransferWise or Wise?
It's still a technology play, but end of the day, if you look at the broader spectrum of money movement, banks at the end user place, like end of the day, it has to come into an account, right? Banks will be fulcrum to still being a very important part of that system.
I see it similar, right? Okay, as just mentioned, I think we have JP Morgan Chase and Citi as shareholders also in PPRO.
And they're watching.
They have different ways to innovate because I think they know that they're struggling internally, right? And it's hard for them to compete with a Stripe or some of these fintechs. But for sure, they will play a role going forward.
So I look at it in two parts. When you look at cross-border, we're looking at basically P2P or smaller ticket transactions versus large ticket transactions. I'd say banks play this very well when it comes to large ticket transactions, and one of the big reasons why they're so strong on this is the trust thing again. A lot of people trust that. But when it comes to small ticket transactions, and I think that's where a big play, a lot of fintechs also coming into that smaller ticket bucket because they're providing much more efficiency with regards to cost and speed as well. Okay, so for example, if you look at a cost of 5 to 10% of transaction cost on a transaction from a large entity, some smaller or newer fintechs are giving into that in a fraction of that cost. And very often they're not even moving the country cross-border, money cross-border. It's coming from one account here to being dispersed from a different account in a local bank in another country. So bringing those things across, I'd say that in such a scenario, banks I think are going to be a little slower to move on this. What's going to happen, I believe, is that over a period of time, these fintechs are going to get more and more market share. I read a recent report that over the last 3 years, it's gone from 93% of bank control over cross-border to 87%. I think it's going to continue to move. It's going to move through the small ticket transactions primarily first. And over a period of time, these same players will start playing on the larger side as well as they build confidence in customers at a lower level.
So I'm trying to work out if that's overrated or underrated.
So
It's a lot of words.
So I'm saying that it's underrated from a perspective of smaller ticket.
Yep.
And overrated from a perspective when it comes to corporate or large ticket transactions.
We got there in the end.
I think it's heavily underrated. In my opinion, banks are just waiting and watching and learning. And they've got these switches that they can just quickly turn on to start participating if they so wished. They're also waiting for, in many cases, they're waiting for the unlimited funding to fintechs to be able to buy that business from them to kind of go away before they step in and say, let's talk now that we are on an even keel and an even playing field.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the last comment there. I'm not sure if there's a switch that can be flicked.
Fable. It's called Fable.
Ah, okay. We're coming to the end of this game. The future is cross-border ACH in real time on your mobile. It's nothing else. It's not cards. It's ACH connecting to each other. Still uses the bank network, but it's point to point. So who's going to come first with this
Underrated.
one? Underrated. Okay.
Underrated.
Yeah, same with me, underrated.
I think I'll disagree. I think it's overrated. Connecting ACHs of various, end of the day, I think the topic is interoperability, right? You are never over till you finish the last mile. You cannot be say just 3 of the ACHs. And so if it's, the reason I'm saying it's overrated is, yes, I agree, real-time payments is the future. I'm not very sure ACH to ACH connect across the world will take a very long time knowing how difficult and the process is. There are some phenomenal work being done in India and stuff, some of that like India and Mars and all that, but I don't think the entire world is at the same level. So it's taking a very long time, so I'd say overrated.
Anyone want to argue with that?
ACH. How about, do I consider UPI similar to ACH? Yes. Okay, if it is, then yeah. I would say so. Yeah.
ACH is just a statement. Whether it's real time or not is not relevant, right?
So real-time payment.
It's rarely real time. It's ultimately near real time. But you're seeing that with India and Singapore, Singapore and Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia. And so these are the pilots. And then you've got similar waves of this happening across Europe under a funny name called SEPA. And you've started to see this happening. But it's moving. And it took maybe 10 years to get the first one going. And within a year or two, you've started to see more. So I'm just curious to see if anyone disagrees or agrees on this.
The biggest risk to this pilot is, the biggest risk for this piloted plane to crash is not having thought through the other aspects of a cross-border payment, which is the purposes, is the documentation kosher, am I by mistake sending money to or from a person who I shouldn't be sending money to? All those things are not taken care of by these apparent innovations or government-to-government linkages. And that needs to be built, and I'm reasonably sure, I mean, since I'm a James Bond fan, I'll never say never, but principally, I don't think any government is willing to take that risk upon them. I've built these amazing rails between the government of X country and Y. The payment is absolutely real-time, but you got to decide whether it's Osama bin Laden's cousin and Dawood Ibrahim's nephew transacting or not. That is the big reason why this pilot plane could crash if it is not taken care of.
Anyone want to add anything?
No, I think coming back to what you mentioned earlier, the question is time, right? For some of these statements, right? For sure, I think it took 10 years. It will go faster, right? You mentioned SEPA for Europe, but clearly there are still hurdles. I fully agree, hurdles that have to be overcome, right?
Okay.
But I really believe it will come.
Okay, last one in the game. So payments is a race to zero. Why are we sitting here right now? So underrated, overrated?
Depends on venture capital.
Okay. I'm assuming that's
That means it's
it's sitting on the fence.
highly possible, but extremely underrated.
Okay. Payments is a race to zero.
Yeah, it is underrated. Look, payments, while it enables everything, right? Payments are central to life itself. So I'd say that statement is underrated.
So you're saying payments is life?
Payments is life.
Wow.
I think, yeah, absolutely. I agree. Payments is life, right? Because there's lots of complexity to solve, right?
So do you wake up in the morning thinking, I'm making a payment today?
No, but I know I won't get through the day without making a payment.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Correct, right? So we're not waking up, but payment is an important part, right? And for me, I think the interesting piece, if you think about, coming back to the earlier comment, it's a trust factor, right? In most cases, I think what we all experienced, we started shopping cross-border during the pandemic, right? We didn't know about the merchant, I didn't know about the name of the merchant, right? But I trusted my payment method, right? It was a super important decision, right? And I think that's the rationale.
Agree, it's underrated. I mean, payments, end of the day, is still clunky, right? There's so many frictions still to solve. I think there's a long way to go on that.
But if you have a good infrastructure, national infrastructure, the friction goes away, no?
It reduces some of the frictions. I don't think any country has been able to do away with all the friction, right?
So for me, I guess everyone here is really payment-related audience here, so it's definitely underrated. One analogy I would want to share is like, I actually started with a telco, so we make money from IDD call. You know, last time, many years ago, you actually pay exorbitant fees to make a cross-border international call. But nowadays, WhatsApp is free data. So looking into payments, it has been evolving. So I believe it will continue to evolve. You never know. I mean, 20 years ago, e-commerce, unheard of. Now, the last few years, boom, everyone, everywhere, digital, contactless. Yeah. So it will continue to evolve, I would say.
I think that's overrated or underrated.
Now underrated, yeah.
Okay, all right, we're going to move on now because I want to get the energy levels up. So what is the biggest challenge in cross-border payments? And I want you to pick one of the four. So is the biggest challenge cost? Is the biggest challenge compliance? Is it speed or is it interoperability? So we're going to start with Stefan first and then we'll roll round because I think I'm picking on you too much here, just by virtue of where you're sitting.
You asked, we should pick one, right? This was the task that was given to us in the prep meeting, right? And clearly for me, it's right now, it's compliance, right? And I always give an example. I joined PPRO 4 years ago, right? I'm one of the 3 managing directors. If I had 3 interactions with our regulatory body 4 years ago, it was probably a lot, right? In half a year, right? If I think about the interactions we're having right now, and the scrutiny and the level of maturity, I think we brought to the system, it's unbelievable, right? So I think it's clearly, I think the compliance piece is an important part, and you have different systems in different countries, different requirements, and aligning this, I think, is, to pick one, the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work coming out at the moment to say, and this is research to say that fintech companies that crack fraud and compliance are the most successful. So if you look at the last 10 years, so fintech as a term, it's a horrible media term, came out in 2012. For the last 10 years, those companies that have cracked compliance and fraud have gone on to be the winners at the moment. And so that's probably one of the things, if you're going to take one thing away from this, is think about compliance and fraud. It's absolutely boring, but it is very, very important. Next, pick one. Don't be shy.
For me, it's, even as a consumer, it's myself, trust. Trust is very important for me. Yep. For example, like I do a remittance to Malaysia itself. I actually test with a small ticket size, $100, whether it's sent or received the other side before I commit to do a bigger transaction amount. So to me, I guess if you're talking about money, we need to trust that it works in a sense. Yeah.
Okay. Next up.
I would agree with Stephen. I think compliance, I'm taking a purely network lens, right? I think the toughest part actually moving money from one country to other is actually compliance. And if anything goes wrong, you're liable, right? And so, and it's a brand impact and everything. So I think when people become slightly more risk averse and not willing to take that, it slows things down. There's not too much of, I would say, innovation coming in. So I think if somebody can sort out the compliance piece, I think there'll be everything else, other three you said, will move in sync with that.
So I think it's interoperability for me, but it's largely driven by compliance and regulation. So I think a lot of the times the systems can't talk to each other the way they need to because of different laws in the land, the different checks and balances there. So I think that's what drives the interoperability for me.
So one of the big reasons why the banks are not active players and as per some statistics mentioned, losing market share to the fintech world is because the regulatory lens is very different for a bank and different for a fintech company. If the bank makes the same mistake, they're fined 20 times what a fintech company would be fined. Whether it's fair or not is for you to decide, but that's the reason why they're staying away from this. So regulatory compliance and regulatory and compliance are definitely, even in the Fable platform, they are the crown jewels. And contrary to what Pat believes, in fact, in our industry, one of the reasons we don't wake up and think of doing a payment is because the compliance guys don't let us sleep at all. So it's one of the truths, whether we accept it or not. And that's the fact of our lives. And we need to, the biggest mistake we can make is to assume that X company or X person or X group of people have cracked it. The cheetah will always run faster than the gazelle because it has to eat. So fraudsters will always run faster than our solutions. So we have to keep making new solutions and trying to beat getting eaten up by the cheetah in this analogy.
Nice. I was going to say, is there a silver bullet here on compliance or interoperability? What could happen? Because I agree that your compliance function, fraud detection, all of these elements need to be evolving. So it needs to get smarter as it goes along. So you have complex models using algorithms. But is there a silver bullet on this? Who's got a silver bullet?
I don't know if it's a silver bullet, right? But for sure, I think we have some large PSPs like Stripe as our customers, and we're debating with them, is there anything where we can work together? It comes only, I think, with working together, right? If I think about our network, we can be a meta layer, right? Because we're sitting in this two-sided network with local payment methods on the one side and all our PSP and merchant partners on the other side, and can we help detecting fraud patterns earlier? Can we help to make a risk and fraud solution of Stripe more powerful, right? Those are discussions we're having with our strategic partners, right? Is there a silver bullet? Right now I can point to most likely not, right? But I think it will evolve, right? And it will evolve around these collaborations where the solution will come from.
Silver bullet for interoperability, seeing as it's the purpose of this session?
So I think it's going to be a natural evolution, very honestly. And the natural evolution, I say it this way because, especially given the post-pandemic scenario and how things are emerging, we've got a more connected kind of a world. You're going to have people demanding more and more towards doing cross-border payments. And the moment you start having more people pulling towards that, you're going to have discussions moving towards things like even crypto, things like this. You're going to have central banks talking about how do we actually give that kind of convenience to our customers while managing control. So they're going to find ways to create these pipes between countries where cross-border payments will move much more faster, quicker, and in a cheaper manner. I think that is going to drive an overall change in the whole industry.
I think the fundamental point is information. Why is this a challenge? Why is a risk? It's basically lack of information, right? Till I think regulators or entities figure out to get more information in the domain, which helps reduce the compliance risk, I think this challenge will remain. I mean, that's not going anywhere as a silver bullet. I see actually a contra scenario evolving. Look at the data privacy laws coming in every domain of geography, whether it's data localization. I think it will be more difficult to actually get data outside your geographic domain. So I'm not very sure there's a silver bullet of this compliance risk going away in a one polarized world, and second, very, very strong geographic denominations of their laws. Earlier, a lot of the stuff would be dictated or said by like what US follows or UK follows. In a multipolar world, India may think differently, China thinks differently, and European Union thinks differently. So it's going to be a much more interesting place with everyone having their strategic reasons. For Russia may or may not be a very different, but for EU countries, Russia may be a very, very different animal, right? So this is going to be actually getting more difficult rather than actually reducing. So there has to be a lot more work to solve it.
Yeah, agreed.
I think the silver bullet exists. It's just that the gun that fires it is missing. That's my personal view. So I think somebody needs to focus on. We figured out a few silver bullets. They're all lying on the table. There's no gun that it can fit into. And one of the reasons that is lack of collaboration. Lack of collaboration between not even just competitors, but even complementing solutions are not collaborating. Having said that, information is very important, but on 10th September 2001, Osama bin Laden was fine. On 11th September, he became a criminal. That kind of speed of change of information is also very difficult. You can aspire for it. You can think about, I want it like that. It may not be available at the same speed. So these are the reasons why, like Pat just mentioned, most real-time payments are actually near real-time. I think we will definitely achieve a near silver bullet. The silver bullet itself is probably similar to a unicorn.
For myself, I really see the silver bullets are the regulators around the world. They are opening up. It's just like my Singapore Deputy Prime Minister was here in India to discuss, interoperability, and I'm really looking forward to use my, my bank as my pay now to do a UPI transactions in India. So it is something that I really envisage that maybe in the next 5-10 years, I think even the G20s are also talking about all this collaboration at the same time. So maybe in 10 years' times, when I do a UPI kind of transactions, I actually do it seamlessly, immediately, transparently, and at the same time, I can get some cashback and rewards. This is what the credit cards are giving me now, cashback. I'm not getting cashback if I do a UPI now. Yeah. So
that's because there's no fee that can be charged for UPI to cashback.
Exactly.
Give it time. So I think the interesting point you just made there around kind of collaboration occurring across markets, and it's the concept of a cross-border sandbox. I think there is a lot of mileage there, and fintechs can start to experiment and launch products and services in different markets. But I think if you're going to take another kind of soundbite away from this session, I think the silver bullets exist. It's just not the gun. I think that's a quality soundbite. I hope you guys are recording that one. The next one is to flip challenges to needs, because you've got these challenges, but it's got to be based on the understanding of a consumer. And so, what is the most important consumer need today? And so we've solved, as an industry, we've solved some of these over the last 10 years, but if you had to pick one of the four, convenience, security, trust, and cost, which one would you pick? And we're going to start right at the end. Come on, Donn.
I would probably still choose
Sticking
trust.
with trust, aren't you?
Yeah, for me, trust is really
You
important.
seem so paranoid.
Exactly. Because I have been scammed many times, you see.
Okay. My sincere sympathies.
I think fundamentally, why does a consumer use a certain payment instrument or use cash or whatever forms of payment is because he has fundamental trust in that payment instrument. I think that's the final decision being impacted. Till any method doesn't inspire that trust, whether it's cross-border or domestic, things are not going to change. So if we can figure out a way to inspire trust to the lowest denominations of the society, right? I mean, if you divide society, the top half have all the payments instruments they use. It's actually the other lower end of the spectrum where still it's a very cash-heavy market. And thanks to you, likes of UPI, is where now we have newer digital payment consumers coming in. I think why did they start doing it? Maybe because of need, but now they trust that payment instrument. I think the further the trust develops in the system, I think that's the way to go.
Fortunately, Pat, I have to say the same thing, right? It's trust. No, think very simple, right? Coming back to the PayPal statement from earlier, right? The PayPal sees himself as a security company, right? Trust is super important, right? Again, in particular around cross-border, you don't know the merchants, right? You trust your payment instrument. This is the reason why you're using it. Will it change over time? Yeah, hopefully, right? Because I think the industry is evolving, cross-border is evolving, and then other things are more important. But we know out of our data, because we can compare in our two-sided network merchants, we can compare PSPs, we can compare their conversion rates, that if you don't have the relevant local payment methods on the on your checkout page, right? A lot of times I think the site will be abandoned, right? And we're estimating roughly 20%, right? So you need this trusted payment method. Because otherwise the shopper will at the end switch and look for something else or somewhere else.
I just can't go with that big ticket, small ticket things. That big ticket, I think trust is the one for me. But if it comes to small ticket, I think it's speed and cost. Because sometimes your small ticket things makes the cost to it, makes it unviable, it makes it no-go itself, if there's a fixed cost to it. So that's how I look at it.
So numbers speak louder than words, which means that if venture-funded fintech companies are spending some of that venture fund on acquiring customers by buying them. Still only 13% from whatever I heard has moved to them. The remaining stays with banks who are charging almost double, but customers are still sticking to the bank only because of trust. There's no need, there are lots of banks in India who offer 6% interest instead of 4% interest. Just by that logic, all 100% of the India's banking should have been done by those 2 or 3 banks that offer 6% interest. The point is that those guys who are at 4% trust their existing bank and they don't. So trust is genuinely in banking and payments number one consideration in the consideration set of customers.
So it's all about trust. Okay. So in my opinion, and not that you want to know, it's cost for me. It's cost. I think trust we've kind of resolved to a degree. If you go via your bank, it's costly. But anyway, let's move on. We're coming up to the last question. And so if you've got questions yourself from the audience, we'll try and get some time so you guys can ask those and the panelists can attempt to address them. So last question for me, in 10 years, what should cross-border payments look like? So let's try and be quite creative about what that should look like. Hopefully we've resolved trust. There's no paranoia. Who would like to go first? Can I have a victim? Go for it.
I think in 10 years, it will be a different form factor. Majority would move to mobile. It will be almost near real time.
Will there be cards?
There will be cards, but majority of a certain segment of population would have moved to a very mobile-oriented or even something more advanced. It will be near real time in certain geographic corridors, for sure. And definitely more seamless one-touch transaction.
First of all, I would say in 10 years we don't talk about cross-border anymore because it's the same form factor what we're seeing on domestic. So this is my hope, right? And I think we'll get there from a technology point of view. So there won't be any cross-border discussion anymore. I agree, it will be mobile, it will be seamless, it will be embedded, right? I think always refer back to Uber, right? If you think about why they're so successful, because there is no payment button, right? Coming back to your comment from the earlier, from the start of the session, you're not waking up in the morning to make a payment, right? You want an Uber ride, and a payment comes with it.
So I think trust will be developed in many more parts of the ecosystem. Today it's just a few, and that will then lead to experience being the most important thing. I'll give you an easy analogy. So 10 years back, you would have to open your car with a key. 3 years back, you could press a button. And now with smart key, you just walk into your car, you just open the door and walk in if you're a certain distance, etc. Payments would evolve into doing that.
What car do you have?
My company is not very well funded, so I'm ashamed to say that.
Wow.
Right now. In 2 years' time,
one
we'll
of those
talk.
cars.
In 2 years' time, we'll talk.
Sounds like Knight Rider.
Yeah, it sounds like that, but that's how it is. When we saw Knight Rider when we were kids, we thought, oh my God, but now it's the way we are. I see a world, even in cross-border, where through the camera of the laptop or the phone you're rocking, that guy will just scan your iris and the payment's done because it's linked somewhere to your payment instrument. The experience will be the king in 10 years' time. Form factors, I don't think there are many more to evolve to. But depending on use case, the user experience will become number one. People will be willing to pay a 5-10% premium for a great user experience. In those 10 years, a handful of companies would have consolidated themselves in multiple ways and created enough trust for now trust being much wider than it is today. And that's my view.
I think we've got everyone's out.
So,
Yep.
In 10 years' time, I would foresee, hopefully, like all the cross-border pain points are all resolved. We can make payments seamlessly. The phones or card form factors, I'm not sure we will still be what it is now. It's just like you look at iPhone 14, it's not much different from 13. So, probably there's no more phone anymore. We might be, using metaverse to do cross-border payment if there is a need. And like what he mentioned, iris payments is truly the experience. In 10 years' time, I think that is very possible.
So in 10 years' time, there will not be this panel on stage. We
I'll
will
be
all
retired.
be redundant and retired. Okay, no, good. So we've got 5 minutes. Now's your chance to ask those questions. Make them tough. These guys need a grilling. So we've got a few questions at the back. I think we don't have any microphones. But maybe you could stand up and shout your question out.
Think of me as your wife.
Wow. You're a lucky man.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So very useful discussion. You did touch upon cryptos, but I think somewhere there's a difference between cryptos and blockchain, right? So in that context, the Swift GPI, for example, they're trying to do something which is information as well as speed. So in that context, maybe there'll be solutions where a blockchain, along with the standard rails, where the trust factor already exists in the banks, can come in. That's what, let's say, a Flywire or a Wise is doing already. So get wholesale and distribute retail using blockchain for information. So that's the future, you feel? That's how the interoperability and the speed and the costs will go down? Is that a possibility?
Do you work for Swift?
Beg your pardon?
Do you work for Swift?
No, I don't work for Swift, but I did work for a company which developed on the sandbox a blockchain-based solution for cross-border. That's how I was thinking that as a competition to Swift, maybe a blockchain solution away from Swift GPI.
Cool. So Swift or Ripple or any one of those players that are doing good work in this space. Any thoughts?
So maybe in principle, I think I agree. Blockchain as a technology, as we discussed earlier, has merit, right? And I believe in it from a technology point of view. I think, as we discussed earlier, cryptocurrencies right now, I don't see it. And I have data because we have BitPay as a payment method, right, on our platform. It's super small, right? I think there's no consumer demand at all, right, to pay with crypto right now. It's similar to what you discussed earlier. It's all about making money and betting on it.
Like we say in the industry, we're still waiting for the ripple to become a wave.
Wow, what a poet.
I agree, yeah.
Next question. All right. I work for the Modular Foundation. We're trying to solve the problem of making sure every country has UPI or Pay Now, so we'll solve that problem if it's not every country in the world. So my question is related to real-time payments. Projects like Nexus are connecting all real-time payment systems for P2P, but the use case of being able to use my UPI app when I go to Singapore or vice versa to make a merchant payment is the one all the bilaterals are focusing on. So what's going to be the use case that we focus on? Is it going to be P2P remittances, or is it going to be merchant payments, or is it going to be e-commerce, or something else?
So I think the fundamental question is, does every country or every use case really need real-time payments? That's a very important question, because real-time payments is not cheap. While we love it, we'd love to talk about it, nobody talks about its cost and its impending price to the customer. In my opinion, real-time payments are not required in probably 75 to 80% of the cases. Real-time information is. As I'm happy to get the real-time information, I'm happy to do the transaction, and I'm happy to get paid the next day. So it's actually a fundamental question which you guys need to also think about, and all of us as well. Having said that, real-time information is very, very important, and you can buy a ticket tonight to go back to London on Expedia.com using your MasterCard, and Expedia doesn't even get paid till you reach London. So it's perfectly fine, it works amazingly, nobody really cares about it happening real time, just to make an easy example for you. So you need to think about those things when you ask these questions in your mind, saying, is this use case, is real-time payments critical to this use case or not? And then you'll start getting the answer about, do I need to do it this way or that? So even if it's a merchant payment through even UPI or whatever, as long as the merchant gets comfort and confirmation he'll get the money, I think the transaction is considered real time for us.
So I see it absolutely similar, right? It's about real-time information, and as a platform, I think we just have redone our what we call sub-ledger, right? We have real-time information at any given point in time, and I see it similar, right? As long as I think I know this payment will come, right? It doesn't really matter if the money arrives a day later, right? But real-time information is important, right? And we believe in it. We've invested from a platform point of view in these capabilities, and so that we can expose it to PSPs and merchants. At the end, I think you want to change the paradigm in industry, right? Right now, we're pushing it out. We're pushing out a settlement to a Stripe, and then a Stripe is pushing out a settlement to a merchant, right? At the end, with real-time information, you want to change this paradigm. You want to have a pull, right? So the merchant sees right away after the transaction, hey, the transaction took place, and that's the most important part. And if he wants to get the money earlier, then maybe pre-settlement he takes a charge, or he waits a day or two, depending on the payment scheme. But real-time information will be key.
Okay. And what happens once these ACH link up? P2P's done, person to business, that's coming through. What then happens to business models?
Yeah, it's a good question. If it happens, I think we'll have to all search for new jobs. But till that happens, I think networks have a dominant share of how money moves in this world. And I think even networks are evolving. I mean, what networks were 10 years back, I've worked for Visa 11, 12 years back, to what they are also evolving how they move the money. So end of the day, I think businesses are a function of dominant power, right? Look at the way, how large and how well-funded networks are, or how many investments they are making in other allied areas. That power of ecosystem they're building, it's almost impossible to dislodge unless something absolutely earth-shattering happens and a domino impact. Otherwise, they're not going anywhere.
Okay, I think we're running out of time. So 3 things. We're all going to be redundant in 10 years' time if you're in payments. You need a silver gun to shoot silver bullets. And I want a brand new car, exactly the one that you've got as well, because I think that sounds fantastic. I've just got it there. Cool. But thank you very much for your time and deciding to listen to us talk on about cross-border payments. Thanks.
And for those from outside India, welcome to India.
Thank you, gentlemen, for doing that with us. We appreciate your time and your inputs. It was quite an engaging session.